I just want to make a few comments, and I want to start by simply saying it's about time. I'm the only sitting member in this body who was here in 1973 when we voted to ratify the Federal Equal Rights Amendment. I sat right back in the seat there where Representative Schultz currently sits. And I remember a debate that was not too different than the debate that we're having here today. But with great pride, I can look back and say that this legislative body ratified the amendment. We were one of the early states to do it, but unfortunately, we never really nationally got over the top. And I just wanted to mention a little bit about my history and why I'm particularly interested in. I grew up in a household. I have one brother and 3 sisters. And my parents raised their 5 children with the idea that we were all equal. And if anybody would have ever challenged that my 3 sisters didn't have the same rights that the 2 sons had, they would have gotten an earful, believe me. That was the environment I grew up in. Well, I got married, and I was doing some coaching, and so my wife and I were teaching at the same location, Henry High School in North Minneapolis. So because I was tied up with some coaching, I said to Carol, I said that we needed to buy some furniture. We were newlyweds, and I said, well, why don't you go over to the local bank in Robbinsdale and take out a loan? Well, we were both beginning teachers. We both had a good credit rating. Our income was about the same. So she went over to the bank, and she came back a few minutes later, and I was coaching her maybe an hour or so later. And I said, oh, did you get the loan? She said, no, you have to sign for it. About a month earlier, she would have gotten the loan on her own, but now she's married, so then her husband has to sign the loan. Well, that was the first time that I remember when we got married that there was really discrimination. I mentioned that I was coaching, and I picked up on what Representative Loeffler said about opportunity for young women. When I first started to teach back in 1964, a young woman at Henry High School would have had the opportunity to be on the front 5. That was where they waved the flags in front of the marching band, or they could be a cheerleader, and then they had a few intramural sports. And that was it for the young women. Today, and then I was going to say a young woman back in those days, if she had a leather jacket on or a leather sweater, it was probably her boyfriend's. Well, when I retired from teaching, 34 years after that, if you saw a young woman in the classroom, that was her leather jacket, her leather sweater, with her own stripes and years of graduation and so on. That's how things had greatly improved. But I do remember in Minneapolis, one of the 3 sports that I coached was tennis. And so we had the opportunity at that point in time for young women to play on a tennis team. And I always had a non-conference match with St. Paul Humboldt every season. So the coach from St. Paul Humboldt comes over, and he said, I've got 4 young women on my team. He said, we're under a court order that because we don't provide a tennis opportunity for the young women, the court has said that the young women can be on the boys' team. So he said, but it doesn't cover Minneapolis, it's just for St. Paul. So he said, is there any problem if the girls play? And I said, absolutely not. We each exchanged our lineup. After the match, you know what the reaction of my boy tennis team players was? Boy, they're good tennis players. My point is sometimes young people handle some of these issues much better than some of us adults. Well, going back to the family that I grew up in, where there was a lot of interest in everybody being treated equally, when I sat back there where Representative Schultz is sitting, at that point I had a young daughter. She was 2 years old. And when I hit that green button, I was hitting that for her, because I wanted her to have the same opportunities that my son, who was a newborn at that point, would have. And that's what this is all about, equal opportunity for men and women. And we're not there yet. And as I said at the beginning, it's about time. Representative Davney indicated 7 years ago. I'm talking about when I hit that green button 47 years ago. And that's what I mean. It's about time. Thank you.